The Heritage Development Trust, based in Empangeni, is organizing a two-day economic empowerment conference to be held in Durban. It's aimed at unlocking economic opportunities in the Zulu kingdom, more especially on land owned by the Ingonyama Trust. King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini, is reportedly scheduled to speak on the first day of the conference. Let's try and get more information now as to where the Zulu kingdom stands when it comes to creating economic opportunities. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu is the lecturer of political studies and international relations at UWC. Prof, good morning to you and thank you very much for your time. The understanding is that the Zulu kingdom is rich in resources, but proper planning is needed to lift millions out of poverty. Let's start with the riches that can be found in KwaZulu-Natal. What can the Zulu kingdom explore?
Thank you very much, Putabo, for your question, and good morning to your viewers. Yes, indeed, KwaZulu-Natal is very good in a number of respects. One, if you look at the landscape, it is really good for agricultural purposes. You would recall that in 1860, when the Indians arrived here as indentured laborers, the main function for them was to basically cultivate sugarcane. That's why we have so many sugarcane plantations, but which are not assisting the local people as should be the case. You also have a number of gum tree plantations and many other trees that are used for furniture and all other stuff. But then most importantly, you also have the tourism industry. There are a number of historical tourist sites that are located in KwaZulu-Natal, including the outskirts of the province at the border with Eswatini, in my area, coincidentally, of Ingwavuma, where you have border caves where the liberation fighters used to operate from while trying to liberate this country. So there is potential, but unfortunately this potential has not been used in the past due to the laws of the time, which means therefore that the time is ripe right now to look at all of this and identify the ones that could be easily used to create jobs and then of course to improve the province's economy. Let alone that we also have harbors which are known all over, with Richards Bay and Etegwini being some of them.
Sure. You've mentioned tourism, Professor. Let me mention to you that the understanding is that there's also the cultural economy that can be exploited here, rural agriculture, mining, logistics, technology, and the maritime sector, given that KZN is a coastal province. With all of these opportunities, that needs proper planning. Why have kings that have come and gone not been able to exploit these?
No, that's a very critical question, Butabo. And in fact, it's relevant now because we are having a new king who has just been installed, someone who is relatively young, someone who is educated, someone who is business-minded. So which means that he is seeing opportunities with his, which his forebears did not maybe see at the same level. That is one critical point. But then also, given the current context that we find ourselves in, whereby we're talking about the increasing percentage of the unemployment rate, and then of course, given many other social ills that are happening. So what is happening right now is you are informed by the current context, both political context and economic context. You are then trying to respond to that context. So which means therefore that if, for example, we were to compare the current king, King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini, and compare him with his father, of course, there are circumstances that are similar, but the reality of the matter is the situation is dire now than it was during the reign, the almost 50-year reign of the late king, King Misuzulu. So therefore, those factors are responsible for us then wanting to do things differently this time around, not to say that the predecessors did not see any need, but then the need is even more urgent now than it was then.
Yeah. Here's a critical question, Professor. The late king kaZwelithini kaZulu. There was this controversy around the Ingonyama Trust, and that is that was not necessarily benefiting the subjects, the people of the Zulu nation, and instead, perhaps this was being used in order to further enrich the royal house as opposed to the people. Do you foresee the son of King Zwelithini kaZulu, King Misuzulu, using this to the benefit of the Zulu nation? And I ask you this because unemployment, as it is in South Africa, it's at an all-time high, and there are those who keep saying that this is a ticking time bomb and that grassroots anger is brewing because of the poverty that we are seeing.
Okay, thanks for that. Maybe, Tony, let me just say, I apologize for giving you a wrong name. Yes, Tony.
No problem.
No, you are raising very critical points. First of all, we should recall that Ingonyama Trust was part of the negotiated settlement, which was part of the discussions during the Contessa talks between 1990 and 1993, that is on the eve of the first democratic election. And when it was conceived at the time, the understanding was that you need a piece of land that would be set aside for the Zulu nation. And it was part of the proposals that were put on the table by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi in his capacity as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu kingdom. So now, between 1994, when we had our first elections, and 2022, a lot has happened. One of the observations, of course, is the one we just alluded to, that there are people who are saying that in its current form, Ingonyama Trust has not been as helpful to the general public as should be the case. So what you then do is you go back in time and then try to establish why Ingonyama Trust came into existence in the first instance, and then you also check as to whether it has achieved its initial goal. If the answer is in the negative regarding the latter question, we then ask the next question: what do we do in order to make sure that we improve the current situation? That is where then the current king comes in with all the knowledge and skills that I've just referred to. That he has identified some of the loopholes, but generally speaking, Ingonyama Trust is sometimes misconstrued by a number of people, including the team that was led by because he came to the conclusion that it should be disbanded, a view I totally disagree with. Because what you do is you look at Ingonyama Trust, identify what works, and then of course identify what doesn't work and then correct that. For example, I had a conversation with other people the day before yesterday, saying that ordinarily, when you look at Ingonyama Trust, the way it is handled is that if you come in as an outsider, you approach the local traditional leader, who will then give you a piece of land to occupy and then use for whatever purpose. But when you decide to leave the area, you don't sell that piece of land, because the land belongs to the Zulu people, and the king is the custodian of the land. So now, whenever the king then identifies weaknesses in consultation with the subject, he then says, okay, here is a piece of land which is economically viable. For example, we have commercial land. What do we do with it? Then that is where the strategy then is going to come in and say, let us use arable land to benefit the people of this particular part of the country, and then provide job opportunities and deal with the unemployment rate we have just referred to, but also make sure that you upskill the youngsters who are unable to get jobs elsewhere so that they can be self-employed, including the elderly people who fall outside of the 35-year bracket, who are not usually taken care of when it comes to job opportunities. So I think this is an opportune moment to revisit the Ingonyama Trust without saying that to throw away the baby with the bathwater and say it should be disbanded. That view I totally disagree with. We have to identify weaknesses and then correct those. That is where the king comes in.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu is lecturer of political studies and international relations at the University of the Western Cape. Thanks indeed for your time and insights.